other family that was like, I didn't say that to them. So instead of introducing you to my husband, because I think you guys know who he is, I wanted to talk a little bit about our journey, because let me just tell you what Monday night is like for us. First of all, as you can see, there's a baby in my belly. And so I was like, my stomach is a little weird today. What is this baby? What's going on today? And so I feel like we were on pins and needles all day long, because just as much as you all were excited, we wanted to come here. So we were like, okay, is this going to happen? And so we were watching the clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 8:01. We were just standing there like, oh God, what if they don't call us? And then when they got to be past 8:30, we were like, Lord, they did not go for us. So we finally gets the call, we're putting the girls in the bed, and he came upstairs, and we were so excited, we started jumping up and down, and then again I remember I had this baby in my mouth. And so I tired myself out of like 30 minutes later, because I had gotten up so much excitement and energy. So just as excited as you are, I just cannot express to you how excited we are. So in my normal fashion, I have a really weird way of looking at this whole thing. I was talking to my job, which I'm allowed to keep, which is a blessing. And they were asking me, well, where are you moving to? Where are you going? And I was like, oh, well, the church is 703 Central Avenue. And I was like, whoa, I'm the entrance of the church. Which was really interesting, because usually when we come, at least the first couple times, we use the GPS to get here. So the GPS is where I'm going to take my approach today. So the GPS, we all call it, but it's actually called the Global Positioning System. And so what it does is it gives you turn-by-turn directions to get to wherever you want to go. So I remember the first time that we were traveling here, it was March the 16th. And in my nervousness, I got really frustrated with the directions. Not because they weren't clear, but because I prefer directions where there's a whole bunch of turns, because it makes me feel sure that I'm going the right way. However, for our journey to get here, the majority of it, in fact, 76 miles of the trip, is just stay on 95. Just stay on 95. So that really frustrated me, because, like I said, I prefer more frequent checkpoints, like turn left here, turn right there. Something about those checkpoints just helped me to feel a little bit more confident that I'm going the correct way. But my fear was, what if I'm on 95 for so long and I keep getting so into the rhythm of this journey that somehow I miss when the voice comes and says, your turn is coming up, and I end up going in the wrong direction. But after using GPS so many times, I knew in the back of my mind, it's going to tell me when to turn. I just hope that it will be enough time for me to prepare for that next turn. So after being here so many times, this is now our 7th time here, I realized that that journey was exactly like the spiritual journey that we took to get here. So the beginning of the journey was pretty clear. Come interview at this church. We got that. We could do that. And we knew that at some point the journey had to end. But that middle part, that 76 miles on 95 part of the spiritual journey, it was difficult. It was very difficult. So it was just sitting there waiting for God to tell us, either you go or you don't. So more than we were waiting for the vote, we were waiting to hear from God, because that's where you're supposed to go. So reflecting on everything that God was doing, and looking back at how clear the direction was from the very beginning, I realized all this time that it was never the global positioning system leading us here. It was a different type of GPS.
All right, all right.
This was God's positioning system.
Right.
So leading us each time, God was telling us, turn here, go there, don't go that way. And so we listened, and it's gotten us to where we are now. And on Monday night, he affirmed through your votes that we have arrived at our destination. Amen. But the beauty of it is, reaching the destination is never the end of the journey.
Right.
Think about when you drive somewhere. So I really like Target. I just learned today there's a Target 12 miles away. But if you were going to Target, you're not going to Target to get there, park your car, stand and say, that's a nice red and white thing on the building, and go home. Never do you go to a destination just to stop and look around. And that's similar to where we are now. So when you get to somewhere so you can do something.
Right.
Similarly, I don't believe that God directed us here to do nothing. has sent us here to do a mighty work in this branch of his kingdom. And I'm just so glad that he thought enough of us, not to only bring us here, but to bring us to you all. This is not the only church in Chester. This is not the only church in Pennsylvania. Not the only church in the United States. But he thought enough of us to give you to us. And that to us is so important. So we don't just thank him for that. We also want to thank you all for following God's directions. Many of you pass, raise your hand if you come more than 10 miles from the church. So you pass probably, we know black churches, one on every corner, so you probably pass 50 churches to come here. And so I don't believe that it's by mistake that God has brought us all together. The most beautiful thing about the GPS is that you start from a destination. Usually my destination I have saved as home. Home is Gorman Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21215. But what I realized was my home address is going to change. I realized that in just a couple of weeks, what has so long been our end point is now where we'll start everything. And that is a major, major blessing to us. So now, what was the end is the beginning. And I cannot wait to see what God is going to do through us. And by us, I don't mean the Ashfords. Through us, I mean the Shiloh family. So again, I just want to thank you. I am so excited to be here. And I hope that you can tell because I really, really am. And I thank you for listening to me again. I'm going to take my seat and let you listen to my husband because that's what you really came for. But thank you again, Shiloh. We are so glad to be here. Thank you.
Service taking place today. To my co-laborers in the gospel, I thank you all for your service this morning, and thank you. If we can all stand and turn our Bibles to the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6. And as you all return to that, I would just like to remind you all to keep in prayer. To keep in prayer are those who are bereaved. If you know that phone number, just give them a call and let them know that you're concerned about them and that you're praying for them. Don't forget the announcements that you all have heard in your hearing. Whether it be if you're going on a trip, make sure you see Deaconess Graham. If you have any questions about the youth locker, make sure you see Deacon Cersei. And for all of you all with children 2 to 5, please make sure that you see Deacon Abner. You can come and talk to me about the Shiloh Development Academy. Please remember all of those announcements that you heard today. 2 Samuel chapter 6. And I would also like to say thank you to the pulpit committee. I think you guys did a pretty good job yourselves. And to you all as a Shiloh family, I thank you all for voting for me. I appreciate you all, and I thank you for accepting me and seeing something in me that would allow you to say that we want this guy to be our pastor. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Amen. 2 Samuel chapter 6, beginning at verse number 6. You gotta say amen. Amen. Read a little bit more time. Say, hold on. Stand next to someone and say, hold on. Ask you to help them find the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6. It's in the Old Testament. Old Testament. Oh, yeah. 2 Samuel chapter 6. And there's nothing wrong with using the table of contents. Amen. 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 2 Samuel chapter 6, beginning at verse number 6. And it reads like this. And when they came to Nathan's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, where the oxen stumbled and shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for touching the ark. And he died there by the ark of God. Right. David was grieved and offended because the Lord had broken forth upon Uzzah. And that place is called Perez Uzzah, breaking forth upon Uzzah to this day. Wow. Let us pray. Father, we thank you. Thank you, Lord. For just being our God. Oh, yeah. We thank you, Lord, for seeing something in us that we may not have seen ourselves, Lord. All right. And calling us to our respective assignments. Thank you, Lord. So Lord, I stand here publicly to say what I've already said in private, and that is I cannot do this without you. I need the anointing that makes preaching easy, Lord, Heavenly Father, so that you may be lifted up. Someone may ask the question, what must I do to be saved? And someone may be encouraged to continue on with their Christian work. Lord, I ask that you let this word fall on good ground, so that in this due season it brings forth good fruit, Lord Heavenly Father. And Satan, we declare you are alive in the season, and that you have no power, control, or authority. So we rebuke every distraction. We rebuke every attack, Lord. We ask that you cover us with the blood of Jesus, Lord. We ask that you touch all around us. And Lord, we ask that your spirit be free to work as you see fit in this place today. Finally, Lord, I ask that you will call us to action. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Amen. And when they came to make construction, as I put out his hands to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled and shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against us, and God smote him there for touching the ark, and he died there by the ark of God. It's my first sermon as pastor of Shiloh Baptist Church. I'm going to preach from the title, Where Were the Levites? Where Were the Levites? This a sermon that I feel God is calling me to preach in response to all the craziness that we've been seeing concerning people, innocent young men and women, being killed throughout the nation. As I consider the modern state of churches today, I have no choice but to admire the artwork, architecture, layout, and designs of these various buildings. Nevertheless, these buildings stand in neighborhoods filled with dying others. I stand in awe of the grandeur and the splendor that the sanctuaries within these respective buildings hold, as they are adorned with the best that modernity has to offer. However, Uzzah is dying. The congregation of these respective churches only complement the beauty found in the sanctuary as they attend service regularly, Sunday after Sunday, week after week, month after month, year after year, as a part of life's routine. These congregations drive in their BMWs, Mercedes, Lexuses, past Uzzah after Uzzah. Come on. That will not live to see another day. Amen. Many branches of Zion have ministries after ministry that teaches us how to empower ourselves for the sake of self-improvement, and so that those who reside under our own personal umbrella can also enjoy the personal luxuries and the comforts that we enjoy and we've learned as part of these ministries. But what about us, who stands just beyond the care of our umbrella? Bake sale after bake sale, Christmas card drive after Christmas card drive, fruit sale after fruit sale, all add to the magnificence of an already opulent sanctuary, so that bragging rights concerning church sumptuousness remain intact. Meanwhile, Uzzah has passed away. Come on. All right. Pastors and bishops, elders, deacons, trustees, and stewards stand with their chests held high as various individuals pile compliment after compliment upon their sanctuary with all its beauty, without a second thought or concern about the Uzzah who will pass away into obscurity. And as we prepare to engage our text, the one question that I have, as I observe the tragedy of Uzzah dying day in and day out, is where are the Levites? The 6th chapter of 2 Samuel unfolds as David has chosen 30,000 men to return the ark of God from Baal Judah, or Kiriath Jearim, to Jerusalem. David, now king of a unified Israel, has determined that he will reverse the acts and policies of Saul that stood in adversity to the will of God. Saul seemed to care nothing about the presence of God or the voice of God, as he carelessly neglected the ark of God and continuously offended the priests and the prophets. Saul's actions brought the wrath of God upon Israel and a violent end to Saul's regime. However, David was a different man and a different king. David was a man who followed after God, who was a man after God's own heart, who served God reverently, who sought to please God. David realized that the presence of God was necessary in all aspects of life in order to have a successful kingdom. So as you look at the difference between Saul and David, the one thing that we have to realize and understand is never get so big that you forget about the God who brought you thus far along the way. When we didn't have apocalypse and it was God who kept us and watched us. When we didn't know where our next meal was going to come from, it was God who looked over us and cared about us. Never get so big that you think you pulled yourself up by your own understood the importance of the ark going before the children of Israel as they departed from Mount Sinai to the promised land. Unlike Saul, I'm sure that David recognized the presence of God in battle as the ark of God went before the children of Israel who were approaching Jericho in the book of Joshua. Unlike Saul, I'm positive that David was aware of the wisdom and power that the judges drew from the ark of God as they ruled over Israel and established tribal government. Unlike Saul, I'm confident that David learned from the mistakes that Saul made of ignoring the ark of God and the trouble that he incurred. David understood, in other words, that prohibiting prayer in school could lead to teenage legacy.
That's right.
When you say that children are allowed to read their Bibles in their classrooms, it leads to violence on school grounds. David had no trouble comprehending the notion that the family that prays together also stays together. You wonder why the divorce rate in America is rising? It's because we don't pray as a family together. We don't worship as a family together. David understood the importance of the presence of God in our lives. David had no problem remembering that it was the God of our weary years and the God of our silent tears who has brought us thus far over the stony road and amid the tragedy of our golden days when hope unborn had died. I can imagine David humming the song, "We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in His holy word. He's never failed us yet," as he was bringing the ark of God into Jerusalem from its current location. The choice that God was the shepherd who would never leave him nor forsake him. The choice of David was simple, as he considered that it was God who was his light and his salvation, which caused him to have no fear. David's decision was simple, as he sings and hums, "It's God who walks with me and God who talks with me and tells me I'm his own." David was going to bring the ark back into Jerusalem, consummating the marriage between the politics and the theology of Jerusalem. However, the question still must be asked, where were the Levites?
All right.
Although David established his family, unified the kingdom, defeated the Philistines in 2 decisive battles to secure Israel, Israel was still a toddler struggling to stand on its own 2 feet under David's leadership. And the ark of God would serve as a spiritual nourishment to fully strengthen the kingdom and allowing it to expand. David, with all the earthly brilliance that he could muster and the full support of a nation, marched proudly 30,000 strong to Baal Judah, loaded the ark of God upon a cart, and grandly began his return to Jerusalem. Can you hear it? The band in full force. The crowd is gleeful. There's a sense of excitement in the air. But where are the Levites? David is using the world system to carry out God's plan. But where are the Levites? And I want to tell you, be careful just because you have the clouds on your side. David had 30,000 in support, but he lacked the necessary support used to accomplish God's will. Numbers are not always an indication of spiritual maturity. Numbers mean that you may be popular, but it's not always an indication that you have God's support behind you. Be careful of the swelling numbers as we look at what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri. The crowds, the fanfare. The numbers do not indicate spiritual maturity as the looting dilutes the power that those people could have. But where are the Levites? So this entourage approaches an incline discussion floor. But where are the Levites? Suddenly this crowd marching back to Jerusalem with the full dignity, decorum, and distinction of a modern-day church stumbles upon a tragedy as Uzzah is struck down by God. And the question still remains, where are the Levites? This incident is not isolated or relegated to a period approximately 3,000 years ago, but it unfolds daily in our lives. And to understand how it happens, we must first understand the characters involved to see how it happens in our lives today. So first, the Levites. They represent those who are considered the clergy of today.
Come on.
As the Levitical order were about the business of preparing and carrying out the sacrifices for the people and served as a point of communication between God and the people. The Levites knew how the ark was supposed to be transported, as God had given them specific instructions passed down to them through Moses. Second, we have King David. In this scenario, who represents a political system. While David desired to please God, he was still the king of Israel and not of the Levitical order. The ark of God represents the presence of God. The oxen and the cart represents the world system of accomplishing various deeds, as this is how the Philistines used to transport the ark into their own country.
Amen.
So, the stage is set. We have King David, who represents the political system.
All right.
And the oxen and the cart representing the world's methods. And we have a young man named Uzzah, whose name happens to mean strength in various applications. Approaching Nacon, which means prepared, and the threshing floor, which is a place of separation. So the stage is set to usher in a new era and stabilize Israel. King David has decided that he will bring the ark of God into Jerusalem to improve its quality of life. However, King David does not incorporate the Levites, who are responsible for transporting the ark from one place to another. And even do the Levites stand or mention to David that this was wrong. David places the ark on a new cart, surrounded by tremendous fanfare. The cart arrives at Nacon's threshing floor. The oxen stumble, the ark falls. Uzzah, in an attempt to prevent the ark from falling, is struck down trying to do the job of the Levites, and a national tragedy occurs. So the stage is set. A given political system has decided to improve the quality of life in a particular community without consulting the religious leaders of that community. The new world order will be ushered in using a new worldly structure, and as it approaches a place of separation, the worldly structure falters. An innocent individual who believes in the system and the structure is struck down trying to maintain the stability of this worldly structure, and the religious leaders of that community are nowhere to be found beforehand. So the stage is set. A young man has decided that he will improve the quality of life for his family. However, because the church has been silent and incognito for so long in political life, he has decided to go along with worldly systems that those in position of power have established in his community. As that system begins to falter and a prepared place of separation, he does his best to hold his family together. He does his best to maintain his economic status. He does his best to maintain his social status. He does his best to hold his family together by putting them on a cart drawn by oxen. However, his attempts fail, and he is struck down economically, struck down socially, struck down spiritually, while the church is nowhere to be found. And a family tragedy occurs. Where
Are the Levites?
are the Levites? While Uzzah's death was physical in nature, the others of today find themselves being struck down spiritually, feeling hopeless in a world of chaos. The others of today find themselves being struck down economically, being forced to turn to welfare and draw from unemployment while living below the poverty line. The others of today find themselves being struck down socially, becoming social outcasts in a world that no longer believes in equality for all people. The others of today find themselves being struck down mentally as the pressures of this world are too heavy and the load is too much to bear. We have many others in the world today attempting to do the job that the church was established to do. And the church is nowhere to be found. Where are the Levites? If the Levites were present, maybe Uzzah would be alive today. And I'll bring it a little bit closer to home. stronger presence in the community. Maybe individuals like Mike Brown,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oscar Grant,
Come on now.
Trayvon Martin,
Yeah. All right.
John